Hi, my name is Jim Stroud, and I'm asking for a few seconds of your time. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it could save your life or some of your family or loved ones. A few years ago, my wife was told she had pancreatic cancer. That if she didn't have surgery performed right away, she would die a slow, horrible death. We took the doctor's word for it because he's a specialist, and he was supposed to know what he was doing. He said he had done a lot of these surgeries, and there was no problem for him. He didn't tell us at the time that a Whipple, which was the surgery he wanted to perform, would kill 80% of the patients that it was performed on, or that out of the 20% that survived, most of them would die within 5 years. 2 weeks later, the surgery was performed in a Tulsa hospital. The doctor came out of the surgical room and told me that Sherlene was doing fine. It turned out it wasn't cancer after all, but he went ahead and performed the Whipple. This surgery pays around $80,000. And I was glad I had the insurance, but I don't feel she ever needed that Whipple. He said that he was going on vacation now, and a friend of his was going to take his place, that he'd be watching after Sherlene. I saw the friend the next day, and he acted like he was aggravated about having to watch over Sherlene, and he didn't want to do his job at all. He saw, read the paperwork, and left. That was about it. We saw him again on Friday, and he was going to release her, and we complained and told him that she was sick and ill, and that she needed medical help. He said the only thing wrong with her is she had a slight infection and she was weak from the surgery. That he'd give her some medication and send her home with oxygen, that she'd be fine. That was on a Saturday afternoon when they released her. Monday morning, I took her to Parsons bright and early because I was worried about her health. The doctor there ordered a CAT scan and blood work to be done. The blood work showed an infection, and the CAT scan showed a pus pocket in her stomach at the incision area close to the size of a softball. I asked them to keep her there, but they said they couldn't do it. They were too small of a hospital, and she needed to be a specialist to look after her because Whipple was a very specific surgery. They sent her back to Tulsa because she was too weak to go on by car, and she had to be transported by ambulance. She got there right before I did. When I arrived at the hospital, I was going up the hallway and I heard two doctors talking. One of them said, "Doctor decides who lives and dies, that makes them a god." It scared me to think that she was being taken care of by this kind of a person. And it scared me to think that your loved ones are also being taken care of by these kind of people. The doctor came into her room shortly after I did and said he looked through the paperwork that had been come down in the ambulance, that there was nothing wrong with her, that Parsons had misread the CAT scan. But he would keep her a couple of days, and if there was any sign of infection, he would give her some medication and she'd be ready to go home by Saturday. Again. The following Saturday, they released her. This time, the doctor didn't show up at all. The nurse told me that Sherlene didn't have any infection, and that I was supposed to call next week sometime and get an appointment to have the bandages removed from the wound. She was still sick and weak, but the drains had been pulled, and I thought that was a good sign, so I took her home. The following Monday, I was worried. She was still real weak, still shaky, and could barely get up. So I took her by car to the hospital down here and checked her into the wound care to have them check the bandage. When they removed the bandage, pus and blood began running down her leg and onto the gurney she was laying on. They immediately wheeled her to the emergency room and checked her in. But this time it was almost too late. It got into her blood system, the infection had into her major organs, and she was slipping into a coma. She was there a couple days, and then we decided it would be better to transport her to Joplin. There was a large hospital there that specialized in this kind of wounds. So we transported her by helicopter this time because she was too sick to go by ambulance. Things weren't looking good. We got to Joplin. The doctor said she might have a 20% chance of life. That was better than she had had before. At one point, we thought she was going to die for several days in a row. And now at least she had a 20% chance. They had paralyzed her. They put a wound vac on her, and they had put an incision down her throat to pump oxygen into her. When she coughed, blood and mucus would come up and they'd have to vacuum it out. The wound vac was trying to deal with a 15-inch cut in her stomach, 4 inches wide. And they'd fill it full of sponges, turn the machine on, and I could watch the machine pull the infection out at the same time it sucked the wound and make it smaller. For 3 months she laid in a coma while they worked on her continually trying to keep her alive. But she did eventually wake up. I can thank God for that. But she was still in a lot of pain and a lot of trouble. She had to build her lungs and her muscles back up again, which was not going to be easy to do. and she had been hurt somehow and her back was twisted. She had to have shots in her back to stop the pain. By now, she was sent to another hospital, a small one, to get her off the large amounts of medication that she was on. She had been laying flat on her back for over 3 months now. They started trying to work with her, but she couldn't. She just screamed and cried because her nerves had been pinched so bad in her back. And she cried if she could get help, if she could get the pain out of her back, she'd be able to walk. They sent her to another hospital, and she stayed there for a little while, and then they finally brought her home. She was in a wheelchair still yet, and I was dragging her back and forth. I took her to a hospital where they did a epidural shot in her back that killed the nerves in her back so she could walk again, and she became stronger. We wound up with an $850,000 medical bill. My insurance paid 80%, but that still left 20%, which was a lot of money to us. We lost the first new car we'd ever bought, and we were close to losing our home. Material I'd bought and put aside to build onto our house was rotted and deteriorated during the time we was gone. There was nothing left hardly. We tried writing a book about the hospital and the experiences, but the book was stopped. Lawyers there said that we could be sued if we talked about the hospital or about the doctors that worked there, that we couldn't mention their names or we could be in trouble. So that book was shot. We did write a book called The Old Rider. It's by J.S. Stroud, that's the pen name. And it's on sale at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and a bunch of online bookstores. The bank's real good down here, and they tried to help us. And they put a help fund called the Old Rider Help Fund at People's State Bank in Cherryville, Kansas. And anyone to donate to help our bills could do that. But we're hoping to sell the book and make enough where we can pay most of the bills off. If you have any questions or ask anything about what we've done, you can contact us at this number. I would sure appreciate it if anybody would at least look at the book and at least tell others what's happened. And it's happened because the laws protect the doctors and hospitals so bad you cannot say a word about them even when they do things like this. We're trying to warn others. The laws have to be stopped. They'll do this to innocent people. I appreciate it. Thank you.